She offered her jacket to a shivering stranger at Christmas Eve, unaware he is a Hell's Angel biker. It starts as a simple act of kindness on a freezing Christmas Eve. A woman sees a shivering stranger outside a liquor store and gives him her jacket. But she has no idea that man isn't lost or helpless. He's a Hell's Angel biker, and he's in town for one reason only: to kill her father before Christmas morning. When a blizzard traps them together in an abandoned motel, something unexpected happens. Her quiet faith begins to crack his hardened heart, and the man sent to end a life starts questioning his own. As dawn approaches and his club closes in, the clock runs out. Will he pull the trigger, or protect the woman who treated him like a human being? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The December afternoon, sky hung low and gray over Main Street as winter's early darkness crept across the small Midwestern town. Mia Caldwell pulled her worn wool coat tighter around herself as she hurried out of the hospice center, her 12-hour shift finally complete. The weather forecast hadn't mentioned the sudden cold front that now swept through the streets, making the 30-degree temperature feel much colder. She checked her watch. 4:15. Just enough time to stop at Miller's liquor store before heading to help Pastor Helen with the church's midnight meal baskets. The pastor had specifically asked Mia to handle this part of the donation drive. They both knew that while the congregation eagerly contributed canned goods and warm clothing, some items couldn't be openly requested by church leadership without raising eyebrows. The little bell above Miller's door chimed as Mia stepped inside, stamping her feet to warm them. Mr. Miller looked up from his newspaper and smiled in recognition. "Evening, Mia. Rough weather we're getting." "Sure is, Mr. Miller. Came out of nowhere." She grabbed a shopping basket and headed for the wine section. "How's Mrs. Miller's hip doing?" "Better since those exercises you showed her. She's actually baking cookies today." Mia smiled, remembering the elderly woman's determination during physical therapy. She selected several bottles of cooking wine for the food baskets. Nothing fancy, just enough to help make proper gravies and sauces. The congregation might raise their eyebrows at alcohol purchases, but Mia knew that small dignities mattered. People deserved real ingredients, not just the dregs of others' pantries. As she approached the counter, the wind howled outside, rattling the store's front window. Mr. Miller glanced up with concern. "You be careful out there, Mia. Weather's turning nasty." "I will. Thanks, Mr. Miller." She paid quickly and gathered her bags, bracing herself for the cold. The bitter wind hit her like a physical force as she stepped outside. Mia turned to head toward her car, but movement caught her eye. A man was leaning against the building's brick wall, partially hidden in the shadows between Miller's and the closed barbershop next door. He was a large man, well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a military bearing despite his current state. His thin jacket was completely inadequate for the weather, and she could see him shivering. Even in the dim light, she noticed blood on his right hand, fresh drops falling from split knuckles. Every rational instinct told Mia to hurry to her car. He looked dangerous, the kind of person her father had always warned her about. But something in his stance spoke of desperation rather than threat. The way he held himself suggested he was trying to become invisible, not looking for trouble. Mia had seen that look before, in the eyes of hospice patients who'd given up hope. Without conscious thought, her hands moved to unbutton her coat. "Sir?" she called softly, taking a careful step closer. "You must be freezing." The man's head snapped up, and Mia found herself fixed in place by intense eyes that seemed to evaluate every possible threat in a fraction of a second. His face was all hard angles, with several days' worth of stubble and a thin scar along his jaw. But what struck her most was the flash of confusion in his expression, as if simple kindness was so foreign it made him suspicious. "I'm fine," he said gruffly, his voice deep but hoarse from the cold. "Move along." Instead, Mia took another step forward, holding out her coat. "Please take this. The temperature's dropping fast, and that jacket isn't enough." "Lady, I said I'm fine." His tone was firmer now, but Mia noticed his hands were trembling, whether from cold or something else, she couldn't tell. "I'm Mia," she said quietly, still holding out the coat. "And you're not fine. You're bleeding and shaking from cold. I have a warm car and another coat at home. Please take this one." The man, she would later learn his name was Cole, stared at her with an intensity that would have been frightening if not for the conflict she saw behind it. His eyes darted between her face and the offered coat, as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Why?" The question came out rough, almost angry. "You don't know me. I could be dangerous." Mia smiled gently. "You probably are dangerous, but right now, you're also cold and hurt. Those things matter more." Before he could argue further, she stepped forward and draped the coat over his shoulders. This close, she could see the moment his resistance crumbled. Not from the cold, but from the simple act of kindness he seemed unable to comprehend. Their eyes met again, and this time Mia saw something shift in his expression. The hard exterior cracked just slightly, revealing a glimpse of bone-deep weariness and carefully buried pain. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. He slipped his arms into the coat's sleeves, and Mia noticed how he winced slightly at the movement. "Take care of yourself," she said softly, then turned and walked toward her car, forcing herself not to look back, despite the weight of his gaze following her. Cole stood motionless, feeling the warmth of the borrowed coat seep into his frozen muscles. He watched the woman, Mia, until she drove away, her taillights disappearing into the gathering darkness. His hand moved to touch the coat's collar, still carrying the faint scent of whatever perfume she wore. Everything about this situation was wrong. He was supposed to be watching, gathering intelligence, staying invisible. Instead, this stranger's simple act of compassion had forced him to engage, to reveal himself. Worse, it had awakened something he'd worked hard to bury, a reminder of humanity he couldn't afford right now. The coat was warm, but Cole felt a different kind of chill settle over him. This woman, with her gentle voice and fearless kindness, had just complicated his mission in ways she couldn't possibly understand. And now he had to decide what to do about it. Cole watched Mia's taillights disappear into the thickening snow, his fingers absently tracing the warm collar of her coat. The gesture of kindness felt like a stone in his stomach, weighing him down with unwanted guilt. He pulled out his burner phone, its dim screen illuminating his face in the growing darkness. The address glowed back at him. 1442 Maple Street. Frank Caldwell's house. "Focus," he muttered to himself, shoving the phone back into his pocket. The mission was simple. Observe the target's patterns until Christmas, then eliminate the threat before Caldwell could testify. The club's orders were clear. No witnesses, no complications, clean execution. Cole had spent 3 days tracking Caldwell's movements, learning his routines. The former club associate had gone soft during his years in hiding, grown predictable. But now this woman, this unexpected variable, had forced contact, had seen his face, remembered his bleeding knuckles from the earlier fight with a local who'd gotten too curious. The snow was falling harder now, thick flakes catching in the yellow glow of the liquor store's security lights. Cole pulled Mia's coat tighter, hating how grateful he felt for its warmth. He needed to move, to find better cover for surveillance. But before he could push off from the wall, headlights cut through the snow. A familiar car pulled back into the lot. Mia stepped out, concern etched on her face. "I couldn't stop thinking about you freezing out here," she called over the rising wind. "The radio says this storm is turning into a blizzard. Please let me give you a ride somewhere safe." Cole's training screamed at him to refuse. Every minute spent with a potential witness was a liability. But the temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees in the past hour, and his fingers were going numb despite the coat. "My car broke down about 5 miles outside town," he found himself saying. "I was hoping to find a mechanic, but everything's closed for Christmas Eve." "No one should be walking in this weather," Mia said firmly. "Come on, I'll drive you somewhere warm at least until the storm passes." Against every instinct, Cole nodded. He told himself it was strategic. Better to control the situation than leave a concerned citizen asking questions. But as he folded his large frame into her modest sedan, he knew he was lying to himself. The car's heater hummed softly as Mia pulled back onto the main street. Cole's eyes automatically cataloged details: the small silver cross hanging from her rearview mirror, a church flyer tucked into the visor advertising Christmas Eve services, a worn Bible in the center console. Each detail added to his discomfort. "I'm Mia, by the way," she said, carefully navigating through the thickening snow. "I don't think I properly introduced myself earlier." "Cole," he replied, then immediately regretted giving his real name. The wind howled outside, drowning out the radio's weather update. "Nice to meet you, Cole. Are you just passing through town?" He grunted an affirmative, watching the snow hypnotically stream past the headlights. His phone's signal bars were dropping. 1 bar, then none. The storm was interfering with reception. "Where were you headed?" Mia asked, leaning forward to peer through the increasingly obscured windshield. "South," Cole said vaguely. "Visiting family." The lie came easily, but something about saying it to this woman made him feel hollow. A crackling voice cut through the car's speakers, the local police frequency Mia apparently monitored. "Attention all units and citizens. Due to dangerous conditions, we are closing all major roads in and out of town effective immediately. Repeat, all major roads are closed until further notice. Seek immediate shelter." Mia's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "That's not good," she said softly. "We've barely made it 10 blocks, and I can barely see the road anymore." Cole stared out at the white void beyond the windows. The storm had turned the familiar streets he'd memorized into an unrecognizable landscape. His phone was dead weight in his pocket. No signal meant no way to contact his handlers, no way to explain why he'd broken surveillance protocol. "I don't think we're going to make it much further," Mia said, carefully pulling the car toward the curb. "Not safely anyway." She turned to look at him, genuine concern in her eyes. "I know this isn't ideal, but my church is just 2 blocks from here. They're setting up for the midnight service and meal program. We could wait out the worst of the storm there." Cole felt the walls closing in. A church, witnesses, security cameras. Everything about this situation was spiraling out of his control, but as another gust of wind rocked the car, he realized he was running out of options. The police scanner crackled again, reporting multiple accidents and stranded vehicles. The deal, storm had effectively trapped them in town. Him, his target, and this woman whose kindness was becoming more dangerous by the minute. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the relentless snow. Mia squinted through the white wall before them, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Even with the headlights on high beam, visibility had dropped to mere feet ahead of the car. "This isn't safe anymore," she said, pulling carefully to what she hoped was the side of the road. "We need to find shelter until this passes." She sat quietly for a moment, then brightened. "Wait, I know where we can go. The old Pine Grove Motel is just a quarter-mile from here. The town keeps it ready for emergencies like this." Cole shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "A motel?" "It's not exactly the Hilton," Mia admitted, "but it's sturdy, has emergency supplies, and most importantly, it's close. The town maintains it specifically for stranded travelers during bad weather." As if emphasizing her point, a fierce gust rocked the car, sending snow swirling across the hood. Cole weighed his options, which were growing more limited by the minute. The storm had effectively killed his surveillance plans anyway. "Fine," he conceded, "but let me drive. I've got experience with bad conditions." Mia didn't argue, trading places with him carefully. Following her directions, Cole inched the car forward through the thickening snow. The old motel materialized out of the white haze like a ghost, a long, single-story building with a faded sign and dark windows. "There's an emergency key under the office mat," Mia explained, as they hurried through the bitter wind to the front door. Her fingers, red with cold, found the key where she remembered. The lock turned with a grinding sound. The office smelled musty but wasn't unpleasant. Cole swept the room with a practiced eye while Mia found the circuit breaker box. The lights flickered on, revealing worn but clean furniture and a stack of emergency supplies in one corner. "The generator should kick in if we lose power," Mia said, pulling out blankets and basic first aid supplies. "Let me look at your hand now. That cut needs cleaning." Cole had almost forgotten about his split knuckle. The cold had numbed the pain, but now that they were warming up, it started throbbing again. He wanted to refuse, but something in Mia's steady gaze made him sit down instead. She worked with gentle efficiency, cleaning the cut with antiseptic wipes from the first aid kit. Her touch was practiced, professional. "I work in hospice care," she explained, noticing his questioning look. "You pick up a few things." "Hospice?" Cole tried to imagine this soft-spoken woman surrounded by death every day. "That must be challenging." "It can be," Mia admitted, carefully applying antibiotic ointment. "But it's also incredibly meaningful. You learn to appreciate the small kindnesses. Speaking of which..." She smiled slightly. "You still haven't told me. What happened to your hand?" Cole looked away. "Hit it on something." The truth, punching his truck's dashboard in frustration when he'd lost sight of his target earlier, wasn't something he could share. "Must have been quite something," Mia said mildly, but didn't press further. Instead, she shared a little of herself as she worked. "I actually grew up around here, but I've been away for years. Just moved back recently to reconnect with my dad." Cole's pulse quickened, but he kept his face neutral. "That must be interesting, coming home after so long." "It's been complicated," Mia admitted, finishing with his hand. "We were estranged for a long time. He made some mistakes when I was younger, got mixed up with the wrong people. But people can change, you know. Sometimes they just need a chance." The sincerity in her voice made Cole's chest tight. He stood abruptly, needing space. "I'm going to check the other rooms, make sure everything's secure." In the bathroom, Cole finally pulled out his phone. The signal was weak, but enough to open the file he'd memorized anyway. Frank Caldwell's photo stared back at him, alongside family details he'd studied for weeks, including his daughter, Mia Caldwell, age 32, hospice nurse. Cole's reflection in the scratched mirror looked haunted. The woman who'd shown him such simple kindness, who'd given him her coat without hesitation, who'd just treated his injury with such care, was the daughter of his target. The same man he was supposed to silence before he could testify. He touched the sleeve of Mia's jacket, still draped over his shoulders. Its warmth now felt like it was burning him. Outside, the storm howled on, trapping him with his conscience and a kind woman whose life he was about to shatter. The heater hummed quietly, but Cole felt colder than ever. He'd done plenty of ugly things in his life, justified them all with loyalty and duty. But standing there, staring at his reflection while Mia's gentle voice drifted through the door as she made them both tea from the emergency supplies, he felt something inside him crack. He heard her laugh softly at something, probably the ancient electric kettles sputtering, and the sound twisted in his gut like a knife. Her father was just a name in a file, a problem to be solved. But Mia was real. Her kindness was real. And for the first time in years, Cole found himself wishing he was someone else, someone worthy of such simple human decency. The generator's steady hum provided a counterpoint to the howling wind outside. In the motel's small kitchenette, Mia rummaged through her church supplies, pulling out cans of soup and packages of crackers. Cole watched her from his position by the window, where he'd been tracking the intensifying storm. "It's not fancy," Mia said, working the manual can opener, "but it'll warm us up. Pastor Mike always keeps these for emergency meals. I was supposed to deliver them tomorrow, but..." She gestured at the whiteout conditions visible through the frosted window. The smell of heating soup filled the small space. Cole's stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since morning. He'd been too focused on his mission, on maintaining surveillance. Now that same single-minded focus made him hyper-aware of every detail. The way Mia hummed softly while stirring the pot, the gentle clink of spoons as she set out bowls, the domestic normalcy of it all. "You don't have to feed me," he said gruffly. Mia smiled, that same gentle expression that had disarmed him earlier. "Everyone needs to eat, especially on Christmas Eve." She handed him a bowl, and Cole found himself accepting it, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The soup was simple, chicken noodle from a can, but the warmth spread through his chest as he ate. "So, what brings you to town?" Mia asked, settling into one of the worn chairs with her own bowl. "Besides your broken-down car, I mean." Cole focused on his soup, buying time. "Just passing through." The lie felt heavy on his tongue. "You said you just moved back?" "About 6 months ago." Mia stirred her soup thoughtfully. "It was time, you know. You can only run from your past for so long before you have to face it." "Some things are better left behind," Cole said quietly. "Maybe, but some things are worth fixing, if you're brave enough to try." She set her empty bowl aside. "That's why I came back, to try with my dad. We lost so many years to anger and hurt. Life's too short for that." The generator sputtered briefly before steadying again. In that moment of darkness, Cole closed his eyes, fighting the weight of what he knew, what he was supposed to do. "Actually, I'm meeting him at dawn," Mia continued. "His lawyer arranged a safe house, some kind of legal situation. I don't know all the details, but..." She sighed. "He's trying to make things right. That's what matters." Cole's hand tightened on his spoon. Dawn. Just hours away. The club would be expecting confirmation soon. They'd want to know why his GPS tracker showed him stationary for so long. "It's funny," Mia said softly, "but sometimes the hardest part of forgiving someone is accepting that they've really changed, that they're not the same person who hurt you anymore." The words hit Cole like physical blows. He stood abruptly, gathering their bowls. "You should get some rest. It's late." Mia didn't argue. The day's events, the cold, the stress, the unexpected shelter, had clearly worn her down. She curled up in one of the chairs, wrapping herself in an emergency blanket. "Wake me in a few hours?" "Sure." Another lie. Cole watched as her breathing evened out into sleep. In the dim light, her face was peaceful, trusting. He thought of her giving him her jacket, tending his injury, sharing her food. Simple acts of kindness that had cracked something open inside him he'd thought long dead. Moving silently, he pulled out his phone. The GPS tracker blinked steadily, a small device that let the club monitor his movements, standard procedure for sensitive jobs. Cole stared at it for a long moment before carefully, deliberately removing the battery. Just buying time, he whispered to himself. But he knew it was more than that. He settled back in his chair, Mia's jacket still wrapped around his shoulders. The night stretched ahead, empty hours filled with memories he'd tried to bury. His first kill for the club, the way it had gotten easier each time, the voice inside that had gotten quieter and quieter until he barely heard it anymore. But now that voice was back, screaming, because of a woman's simple kindness, because she'd looked at him and seen a person worth helping, not knowing he was sent to destroy her world. The generator hummed. The wind howled. And Cole sat in the darkness, watching over Mia's sleep, the weight of his orders pressing down like a physical thing. "I was supposed to kill her father before Christmas morning," he whispered into the empty room, the words falling like stones into the quiet. The old wall clock ticked past midnight, its rhythm steady against the howling wind outside. Cole hadn't moved from his vigil, his eyes fixed on the shadows dancing across the motel walls. The emergency lights cast everything in a dim, bluish glow, making the familiar seem strange and uncertain. A soft rustling drew his attention. Mia stirred in her chair, the emergency blanket crinkling as she shifted. Her eyes opened slowly, taking in her surroundings before settling on Cole. "You haven't slept at all, have you?" she asked, her voice thick with concern. Cole shook his head. "Not tired." Mia pushed herself up, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "Well, if we're both awake, we might as well have coffee." She reached for her church supplies bag. "I always keep some instant coffee for late shifts. It's not great, but it's something." She busied herself with the electric kettle they'd found earlier, the familiar routine seeming to ground her. The water bubbled and steamed, and soon the sharp scent of coffee filled the small space. "Here," she said, holding out a styrofoam cup. "It's hot, at least." Cole accepted it, wrapping his hands around the warmth. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the storm providing a constant backdrop to their thoughts. "Where did you learn to be so—" Cole paused, searching for the right word. "Kind to strangers?" Mia smiled, but there was a depth of understanding in her eyes that made Cole want to look away. "My job teaches you to see people, really see them. When you work with the dying, you learn that everyone has a story worth hearing." "Must be hard," Cole said, "watching people die." "It is, but it's also a privilege, being there for people in their final moments." She took a sip of coffee. "You know what I've learned? The thing people regret most isn't what they did wrong. It's the connections they never made, the love they were too afraid to give or receive." Cole shifted uncomfortably. "Some people don't deserve connections." "Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst choices," Mia said quietly. "That's what I believe anyway." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Cole found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "I grew up in foster homes, different family every few years, never stuck anywhere long enough to—" He trailed off, surprised by his own openness. Mia didn't push, just nodded encouragingly. "Joined the Marines after aging out. Seemed like the right thing to do. Finally belonged somewhere, you know?" He stared into his coffee. "Came back different. We all did." "War changes people," Mia said softly. "Yeah." Cole's voice was rough. "But sometimes the real damage comes after, when you're trying to figure out who you are without the uniform." Outside, the wind screamed against the windows, making them rattle in their frames. The storm seemed to be reaching its peak, the world beyond their shelter a swirling mass of white. "That's when faith helped me most," Mia said after a while. "Not in some big, dramatic way. Just knowing that every day is a chance to choose differently, to be better." "That simple, huh?" Cole's tone was skeptical, but not mocking. "Simple doesn't mean easy." Mia set her empty cup aside. "I see it every day in my work. People facing death often find clarity about life. They realize that love, giving it, receiving it, choosing it, that's what matters in the end." Cole felt something crack inside his chest, a hairline fracture in the walls he'd built so carefully. He thought about the jacket still around his shoulders, the gentle way she'd cleaned his wounded hand, the soup she'd shared without hesitation. "My faith isn't about rules or judgment," Mia continued. "It's about believing in the possibility of redemption, that it's never too late to change course." The generator chose that moment to sputter, causing the lights to flicker ominously. The room dimmed for several seconds before the power steadied again, but the brief darkness seemed to emphasize their isolation from the world outside. "Sometimes," Cole said, his voice barely audible above the storm, "the course feels set, like there's no turning back." Mia leaned forward, her eyes finding his in the uncertain light. "There's always a choice, always, even if it's just choosing to take the first step in a different direction." The lights flickered again, longer this time. In the alternating light and shadow, Cole saw the truth of her words reflected in her face. Not naive optimism, but a deep, tested faith in the possibility of change. The generator groaned, and the emergency lights dimmed once more, casting strange shadows across the walls of their temporary shelter. The storm raged on outside, but in that moment, Cole felt the isolation more keenly than ever. Not just from the world beyond the motel walls, but from the person he'd been just hours ago, before a stranger's kindness had begun to thaw something he'd thought permanently frozen. As midnight approached, the storm's fury began to settle into a steady rhythm. The generator's hum provided a constant undertone, and the emergency lights cast a soft glow throughout the room. Cole had stretched out on one of the worn couches, his breathing deep and even. Mia watched him for a moment, noting how sleep softened the hard lines of his face, making him look younger, more vulnerable. Believing him asleep, Mia moved to the window, where moonlight occasionally broke through the swirling snow. She knelt beside an old armchair, folding her hands quietly in her lap. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Lord, thank you for this shelter tonight," she began, her words simple and heartfelt. "Thank you for keeping us safe from the storm. Please watch over Dad tomorrow. Keep him protected on his journey." She paused, drawing a steadying breath. "And Lord, please help that man I found freezing outside the liquor store. I don't know his whole story, but I know he's hurting. Show him he's not alone." Cole lay perfectly still, each word landing like a physical touch against his conscience. He'd been awake the whole time, and now Mia's gentle prayer wrapped around him like another jacket, warming places he'd thought long frozen. "Help me be the kind of person who sees others the way you see them," Mia continued. "And if it's your will, maybe use me to show him there's still good in this world." Amen. The silence that followed felt holy somehow, charged with meaning. Cole couldn't bear it. He rose abruptly, startling Mia as he headed for the door. "Cole? Where are you?" "Need some air?" he managed, his voice rough. Just for a minute." Before she could protest, he pushed through the door into the storm. The wind hit him like a wall, snow stinging his face. He welcomed the shock of cold. It helped clear his head, gave him something to fight against that wasn't his own conscience. Cole stepped away from the building, letting the storm envelope him. The cold bit through his clothes, but he barely noticed. His mind was too full of Mia's words, her quiet faith, her inexplicable kindness. She'd prayed for him, a stranger who'd entered her life with violence in his heart. The weight of that kindness pressed against his chest until he could hardly breathe. He thought about his orders, about Frank Caldwell waiting somewhere in town, about the club expecting results before dawn. Then he thought about Mia's gentle hands cleaning his wounds, her unquestioning offer of shelter, the way she listened without judgment to the little he'd shared. The wind howled around him, driving snow into his eyes, but Cole stood rooted in place. For the first time in years, he felt the full weight of what he'd become, the choices he'd made, the life he'd accepted as inevitable. And for the first time, those choices felt like chains rather than armor. After several minutes, the cold finally drove him back inside. Mia was waiting by the door, worry evident in her expression. "You're completely soaked," she said, immediately reaching for one of the emergency blankets. "What were you thinking?" Cole accepted the blanket but didn't move to wrap it around himself. Instead, he stood there, dripping onto the worn carpet, struggling to find words for what was churning inside him. "I can't remember," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "The last time someone was kind to me. Just kind, without wanting anything." Mia's hand stilled on the blanket. "Everyone deserves kindness, Cole." He shook his head, water droplets flying from his hair. "No, not everyone. Not—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "Yes, everyone," Mia insisted quietly. "Especially those who think they don't deserve it." Something broke in Cole then, not dramatically, but quietly, like ice cracking beneath the surface of a frozen river. He allowed Mia to guide him to a chair, to wrap the blanket around his shoulders. The warmth began to seep back into his body, but the real thaw was happening deeper, in places he'd kept frozen for years. Outside, the storm's fury was finally beginning to ease. The wind's howl had softened to a moan, and the snow fell more gently now. Through a break in the clouds, a faint hint of starlight pierced the darkness. Not dawn yet, but a promise that it would come. Cole sat in the growing quiet, the weight of his weapon hidden beneath his clothes suddenly unbearable. In his mind, he saw two paths stretching before him, one familiar, stained with violence and justified by loyalty to men who'd never pray for his soul. The other path was unknown, terrifying in its possibility, but it offered something he'd thought forever beyond his reach, a chance to be better than his worst choices. For the first time in years, Cole allowed himself to imagine walking that second path. It would cost him everything he'd built his life around, his reputation, his position in the club, possibly his life. But sitting there in that run-down motel, wrapped in a blanket given by a woman who'd seen him at his worst and offered kindness anyway, Cole made his choice. He would not kill Frank Caldwell. The decision, once made, felt like setting down a crushing weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of him. The storm continued to gentle, snow now falling in lazy spirals past the windows. Somewhere beyond the clouds, dawn was coming, bringing with it a new day and all its consequences. But for now, Cole sat in the quiet, letting himself feel the first tentative stirrings of hope. The peaceful moment shattered when Cole's burner phone vibrated against his leg. The harsh buzz felt like an electric shock, jolting him from his tentative peace. His stomach dropped as he saw the screen light up. Cell service had returned with the calming storm, and with it came a flood of missed messages. 23 unread texts, 5 voicemails. Each notification felt like another nail in his coffin. Cole glanced at Mia, who had dozed off again in her chair, the emergency blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. Moving silently, he stepped into the bathroom and closed the door before checking the messages. The first few were standard check-ins, growing increasingly agitated. Then they turned ugly. "Where's your tracker? Report status now. You're off route. Explain. License plate match? Mia Caldwell, Frank's daughter. What game you playing, Rourke?" His hands grew cold as he read. The final message made his blood freeze. "You got 1 hour to correct course. After that, we handle both problems." Cole leaned against the sink, his reflection in the spotted mirror looking ghostly in the dim light. They knew. They'd traced Mia's car, probably had people already moving into position. The club didn't tolerate betrayal. He'd helped enforce that rule enough times to know exactly what handling both problems meant. He'd been foolish to think he could just delay, that somehow morning would bring a clean solution. The club wouldn't just let this go. They'd kill Frank Caldwell, yes, but now they'd kill Mia too. And him. They'd make examples of all of them. Walking back into the main room, Cole found Mia awake, watching him with concern in her eyes. The warmth they'd shared earlier felt suddenly fragile, like frost on a window pane. "I need some air," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Storm's letting up." But Mia had spent years reading people's faces in their final moments, seeing past their brave fronts to the fear beneath. She stood slowly, her expression changing as she really looked at him. "Something's wrong," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, I just—" "Cole." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You're afraid. I can see it." The lie died in his throat. How could he keep pretending when she saw through him so easily? The weight of his phone felt like a bomb in his pocket, each second ticking away, bringing violence closer to this woman who'd shown him nothing but kindness. "People are coming," he said finally, the words falling like stones into the quiet room. "Bad people. Because of me." Fear entered Mia's eyes then, but she didn't back away. "The kind of people who gave you those bruised knuckles?" Cole nodded, unable to meet her gaze. The emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls, making the room feel smaller, more confined. Outside, the storm had calmed to gentle snowfall, but inside, a different kind of storm was building. "They're not just coming for me," he continued, the words bitter in his mouth. "They know who you are. They know about your father." Understanding dawned on Mia's face, followed by a deeper fear. Not for herself, but for her father. Cole watched the realization spread across her features and hated himself for bringing this danger into her life. "We need to leave," he said, already moving to check the windows. "Now. Before—" His phone buzzed again. Another message. "Units in position. Deadline stands." The few hours of peace they'd found in this shelter suddenly felt like a dream, evaporating in the harsh light of reality. Cole had spent years building his life in the club, earning trust, becoming someone they relied on. Now, in one night, he was burning it all down. And he knew there would be no going back. Looking at Mia's worried face, Cole understood with crystal clarity what he had to do. Protecting her, and by extension her father, meant more than just walking away from his old life. It meant actively standing against it. The club would never stop hunting him, but maybe he could buy enough time for Mia and Frank to disappear. "I have to tell you something," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "The real reason I was in town—" But before he could continue, headlights swept across the motel windows. A vehicle was pulling into the parking lot, moving slowly through the fresh snow. Cole's training kicked in. He moved quickly, pulling Mia away from the windows and into the shadows. The headlights cut through the thin curtains, casting bars of light across the room that looked too much like prison cells. "Those aren't police lights," Mia whispered, her voice steady despite her fear. No, Cole agreed grimly. They're not. In that moment, as engine sounds grew closer, Cole felt the last threads connecting him to his old life snap completely. There was no middle ground anymore, no way to walk the line between who he was and who he wanted to be. Protecting Mia meant becoming something else entirely, a traitor to the club, a man marked for death, but maybe finally someone worthy of the kindness she'd shown him. The headlights went dark, leaving them in shadow. Outside, car doors began to open. Cole pulled Mia deeper into the shadows of the motel room, his heart pounding. The footsteps outside crunched in the fresh snow, then faded. They were circling the building. Time was running out. "Listen to me," he whispered urgently, gripping her shoulders. "What I'm about to tell you, you need to hear all of it, fast." Mia nodded, her eyes wide but steady in the dim light. "I'm not here by accident. I was sent to kill your father before Christmas morning." The words tumbled out, harsh and ugly in the quiet room. "The motorcycle club I belong to, they ordered the hit because he's going to testify. I was supposed to make it look random, just another holiday crime statistic." Mia's hands flew to her mouth, but she didn't make a sound. Tears welled in her eyes as she took a step back, processing the brutal truth. Cole watched as understanding dawned, why he'd been at the liquor store, why he'd seemed so conflicted by her kindness. "All this time?" she whispered, voice trembling. "You were planning to—" "Yes," Cole admitted, the shame burning in his throat. "But I can't. Not anymore. Not after—" He gestured helplessly between them, at the jacket she'd given him, at the remnants of their shared meal. "You showed me something I thought was gone from the world. Kindness without strings. I can't repay that with murder." Tears slid silently down Mia's cheeks, but she didn't collapse or scream. Her grief was quiet, controlled, the kind of strength Cole recognized from people who'd faced hard truths before. "Is there still time?" she asked finally, wiping her eyes. The simple question held worlds of meaning. Time to save her father, time to make things right, time to choose a different path. "Yes," Cole said firmly. "But we have to move now. The club sent people. That's them outside. They're checking the building first, standard procedure. We have maybe 5 minutes." Mia took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Tell me what to do." Cole pulled out his burner phone, already formulating a plan. "First, we warn your father. He can't leave where he's hiding. The club will be watching all the roads." He typed rapidly, sending an anonymous text. "Stay put. Danger coming. We'll contact when safe." "He's at a friend's cabin," Mia said. "Off the grid mostly. The attorney arranged it." "Good. That helps." Cole peered through a gap in the curtains. 2 figures were visible now, moving toward the front office. "I can mislead the club. Buy us time. Make them think we left hours ago, heading east. But you need to get somewhere safe, too." "I'm not leaving you to face them alone," Mia protested. "You have to," Cole insisted. "They know your face now, and I—" He hesitated, then continued softly. "I need to know you're safe. It's the only way I can do what comes next." Outside, the sound of breaking glass echoed. They'd forced their way into the office. Mia flinched but stayed focused. "What's the plan?" she whispered. "There's a maintenance exit through the laundry room. When I give the signal, you'll take it. There's a snowplow about half a mile south. I can hear it working. The roads are being cleared. Get to it, flag it down. Most drivers have radios. They can call for help." Mia nodded, but her eyes were full of concern. "And you?" "I'll create a diversion, then double back through the storm drains. I know their tactics. I can stay ahead of them long enough to matter." He checked his phone again. Your father confirmed he got the message. He's staying put. The sound of footsteps grew closer. Cole guided Mia toward the laundry room, moving silently through the shadows they'd come to know during their long night together. At the door, she turned to him. "Why did you change your mind?" she asked softly. "Really?" Cole thought about her prayer in the night, about the way she'd tended his wounded hand, about the simple act of a coat freely given. "Because you made me remember I was human," he said simply. Mia touched his arm gently. "God hasn't forgotten you, Cole. Neither will I." The footsteps were almost at their door now. Cole tensed, ready to move. Through the windows, the first rays of Christmas. Morning sun were breaking through the clouds, painting the snow-covered world in shades of hope and warning. "Now," he whispered, and Mia slipped through the door into the gray dawn. Cole squared his shoulders and turned to face what was coming. For the first time in years, he felt truly awake, truly alive. The sun rose higher, its light flooding the room, and with it came the certainty that whatever happened next, he'd finally chosen the right path. The first light of Christmas morning painted the snow-covered parking lot in shades of pink and gold. Cole watched as Mia hurried to her car, her footsteps crunching in the fresh snow. His chest felt tight, a feeling he wasn't used to. Fear he knew well, but this was different. This was worry for someone else's safety. "Take the back roads," he instructed, his breath visible in the cold morning air. "Stay off the main highways. They'll be watching those first." He handed her a piece of paper with hastily scrawled instructions. "These are the routes they won't expect. I marked the surveillance points they typically use." Mia nodded, clutching the paper with gloved hands. Her face showed a mix of determination and concern. "What about you? What you're planning, if they catch you?" "Don't think about that," Cole cut her off gently. "Focus on getting to your father. Keep him calm. Make sure he understands he can't move from that cabin yet. Not until I send word." The wind whipped around them, carrying loose snow in swirling eddies. Mia pulled her spare coat tighter. Cole still wore her original one, unable to bring himself to take it off. It had become more than just warmth now. It was a reminder of the choice he'd made. "How will you convince them?" she asked, her hand on the car door. "The club, they'll want proof." Cole's expression hardened slightly. "I've got that covered. Been doing this long enough to know how to make things look real." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "There's an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Perfect place for a hit. I'll stage it there. Blood evidence, signs of a struggle. Then I'll burn it. They'll find exactly what they expect to find." "But how will you get the blood? The evidence they'll look for?" Cole pulled a small knife from his pocket. "Some of it will be mine. The rest, let's just say I know where to get what I need. Butcher shops throw out plenty every morning." Mia's eyes widened with understanding, then softened with concern. "Be careful," she whispered. "Please." The sound of distant engines caught their attention. The town was waking up. They were running out of time. "Go," Cole urged. "Call your father from that burner phone I gave you. Only from that phone. Tell him exactly what I said. Stay put. Keep the lights off at night, no fires in the fireplace. The club knows his usual patterns. Any deviation will make them suspicious." Mia slipped into the driver's seat, but hesitated before closing the door. "Cole," she started, then seemed to struggle for words. "I know," he said quietly. "Me too." The car door closed with a soft thump. Cole stepped back, watching as Mia carefully navigated through the snow-covered parking lot. His mind was already racing ahead to what needed to be done. He had maybe 3 hours before the club would expect initial confirmation of the hit. As soon as Mia's taillights disappeared around the corner, Cole moved into action. He drove his own vehicle to the warehouse district, choosing his location carefully. The abandoned building he selected was perfect, remote enough for privacy, but not so isolated it would seem suspicious. The club would believe Frank would come here thinking he could hide. Working methodically, Cole began creating his scene. He'd done this before, but never to deceive his own people. The irony wasn't lost on him, using skills learned in darkness to protect the light he'd found. The butcher shop's dumpster provided what he needed for blood evidence. His own contribution came from a careful cut on his arm, enough to make it look like there had been a struggle. He scattered the evidence precisely, telling a story with each detail. Frank had come here. There had been a fight. It had ended badly. As he worked, Cole's phone buzzed repeatedly. The club was getting impatient. He ignored the messages, knowing each minute of silence added credibility to his story. They would believe he was being thorough, cleaning up loose ends. Finally, when everything was in place, Cole took the photos they would expect. Just enough detail to confirm the hit, not enough to invite too much scrutiny. He applied filters to hide the fact that the blood was hours old, adjusted the timestamps, then sent them through encrypted channels to his handlers. The response came quickly. "Confirmation received. Clean exit. No witnesses?" Cole typed back. "Daughter was visiting friend across town. No connection to events. Site will be ash by noon. Good work. Return for debrief." Cole deleted the messages and removed the phone's battery. He knew what would happen next. They would send someone to verify, probably within 24 hours. By then, the fire would have destroyed any evidence that might contradict his story. The sun was fully up now, Christmas morning in full swing. In houses across town, children were probably opening presents, families were gathering, joy was being shared. Cole felt a deep ache in his chest, thinking about Mia and her father, wondering if they were together yet, if they were safe. He set the charges carefully, making sure the fire would look natural. Old wiring, faulty space heater. As he worked, he found himself thinking about Mia's prayer from the night before, about kindness and second chances. He wasn't sure he believed in God, but he believed in what he'd seen in her eyes. The possibility of redemption, of change. The last thing Cole did before leaving was take off Mia's jacket. He studied it, for a long moment, remembering how it felt when she first draped it over his shoulders. Then he carefully placed it near the building's entrance, where it would be found and assumed to be evidence that Frank had been there. Walking away, Cole felt the cold more keenly without the jacket. But something else had taken its place, a warmth he hadn't felt in years, burning deep in his chest. It felt like purpose, like hope. From a safe distance, he watched the flames begin to rise. Smoke curled into the morning sky, carrying with it the last traces of his old life. Somewhere out there, Mia was driving the back roads he'd marked, heading toward her father. He didn't know if he would ever see her again, but he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. The sound of fire engine sirens began to wail in the distance. Cole turned and walked away, disappearing into the Christmas morning crowd of last-minute shoppers and churchgoers. His phone remained silent in his pocket, the battery separated, buying precious time for a father and daughter to vanish into safety. Cole's phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. The message made his stomach tighten. "Story doesn't add up. Return now for verification." He knew what that meant. The club had spotted inconsistencies, maybe in the photos, maybe in his timeline. They were too good at what they did to be fooled for long. His carefully constructed deception was already unraveling. 3 more messages followed in quick succession, each more threatening than the last. The final one left no room for doubt. "You have 1 hour. After that, you're marked." Cole stood in the December morning light, watching families hurry past with armfuls of presents. He'd known this moment would come. There was only one way forward now, the hardest road, but the right one. The federal building was quiet on Christmas morning, staffed only by a skeleton crew. Cole walked through the front door, hands visible, and spoke directly to the security guard. "I need to speak with whoever's handling the Frank Caldwell case. I have information and I'm ready to cooperate." Everything moved quickly after that. Within hours, Cole sat across from 2 federal agents, telling them everything, not just about Frank's case, but about years of club operations, names, dates, locations. Each word felt like both a betrayal and a release. Meanwhile, across town, Mia's car pulled into the safe house driveway. Her father was waiting, pacing anxiously by the window. When she stepped out of the car, Frank Caldwell's composure crumbled. He ran to her, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying, holding her tight. "All these years, everything I put you through?" Mia held him back just as tightly, her own tears falling. "I know, Dad. I know." They sat in the safe house living room, talking for hours. Years of hurt and misunderstanding poured out. His involvement with the club, her mother's death. The long silence between them. But mixed with the pain was healing, each honest word building a bridge across the gulf that had separated them. "When did you decide to testify?" Mia asked softly. Frank wiped his eyes. "The day you sent me that photo of Mom's grave. You'd been taking care of it all those years, even when you hated me. That's when I knew I had to try to be worthy of being your father again." As Christmas Day deepened, father and daughter shared a simple meal from Mia's church supplies. They talked about the future, about second chances, about forgiveness. The fear wasn't gone. They both knew the danger was still real, but something stronger had taken its place. In his holding cell, Cole sat on the narrow bunk, listening to distant Christmas carols drifting through the building. He thought about Mia's quiet strength, about Frank's courage in choosing truth over safety. He thought about all the choices that had led him here. For the first time since he was a child in foster care, Cole felt the urge to pray. He didn't know the right words. He wasn't even sure anyone was listening. But in the growing darkness, he folded his hands and whispered, "I don't deserve forgiveness. But if you're real, if you're the one Mia believes in, help me make this right." The words felt clumsy, inadequate. But as they left his lips, Cole felt something shift inside him, like a heavy door finally beginning to open, letting in the first rays of light. January brought bitter winds and long nights to the rehabilitation center. Cole sat in his sparse room, running his fingers over the worn pages of a book Mia had brought during her last visit. The faith-based program wasn't what he'd expected. No forced sermons or guilt trips, just quiet encouragement and steady support. 3 months down, he wrote in his journal, a requirement of the program. Still feels strange to wake up without checking for threats. February melted into March. Cole's days fell into a rhythm. Work assignments in the center's woodshop, group sessions where he slowly learned to speak about his past, and chapel services he attended with growing curiosity rather than obligation. During one visit, Mia noticed the calluses on his hands were from sanding wood now, not fighting. "Dad's doing well," she told him, setting down a fresh stack of books. "The testimony went smoothly. They've moved him somewhere warm. He's actually learning to garden." She smiled at the thought. April brought rain and renewal. Cole received word that his cooperation had helped federal authorities dismantle 3 major criminal operations. He felt no triumph, only a quiet relief. During group therapy, he spoke about the night in the motel, about how a simple act of kindness had cracked open his carefully maintained darkness. By May, Cole had earned privileges through good behavior. He could walk the grounds unsupervised, feeling spring sunshine on his face. Mia's visits became monthly highlights, each one carrying news of her father's progress in witness protection. Frank had started volunteering at a community center, finding his own path to redemption. Summer stretched long and warm. Cole's therapist noted significant changes: less tension in his shoulders, more eye contact, the ability to sit with difficult emotions instead of burying them. In July, he joined the center's restorative justice program, writing letters of apology to those he'd harmed. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," he admitted to Mia during an August visit. "Facing it all, owning it." She nodded, understanding. That's why it matters. September painted the trees gold and crimson. Cole received certification in woodworking, his first legitimate skill in years. His pieces, simple boxes and frames, began selling in the center's gift shop. Each sale meant restitution paid, small steps toward making things right. October brought shorter days and more time for reflection. During chapel services, Cole found himself staying after, asking questions about forgiveness and second chances. The chaplain never pushed, just listened and shared his own story of transformation. In November, as the first snowflakes fell, Mia arrived with a familiar package. Cole recognized the jacket he'd worn that Christmas Eve night, now carefully cleaned and repaired. He held it, remembering the desperate man he'd been, shivering against that brick wall. "I thought you might want it back," Mia said softly. "Winter's coming again?" Cole folded the jacket gently. "Keep it," he replied. "Maybe you'll find someone else who needs it more than I do now." The days grew shorter, but inside the rehabilitation center, light remained. Cole's journal entries shifted from anger to reflection, from fear to cautious hope. Frank's letters arrived monthly, each one sharing small victories: a new friend made, a garden grown, a past finally faced. As December approached again, Cole stood at his window watching early snow dust the grounds. The man who had arrived here 11 months ago would have seen the snow as a tactical concern, marking exits and escape routes. Now he simply saw beauty, and in that difference lay the measure of his journey. The jacket remained with Mia, a reminder that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest acts of grace. Winter was coming again, but this time Cole faced it with a warmth that no cold could touch, the warmth of redemption, slowly earned, one day at a time. Snow drifted lazily past the stained glass windows of St. Mark's Lutheran Church, casting colored shadows across wooden pews worn smooth by decades of faithful attendance. 1 year had passed since that fateful Christmas Eve, though it felt both longer and shorter to those who had lived through its life-changing hours. Mia Caldwell moved quietly through the church basement, organizing boxes of food and warm clothing for the annual Christmas Eve meal delivery program. She wore the familiar jacket, the same one she'd given to a stranger exactly 1 year ago. She'd taken to wearing it during her volunteer work, a reminder of how small acts of kindness could ripple outward in unexpected ways. The basement hummed with activity as volunteers prepared holiday meals for the homeless and elderly. The scent of coffee and fresh-baked cookies mixed with pine garlands and warm spices. Mia checked her watch. 6:30 in the evening. The Christmas Eve service would begin soon. Upstairs, the sanctuary filled slowly. Regular congregants mixed with visitors, sharing quiet greetings and warm smiles. Near the back, Cole Rourke slipped in quietly, nodding to the usher who recognized him from his work with the Rehabilitation Center's outreach program. He wore clean work clothes and carried himself differently now. Straighter, calmer, more at peace. The past year had reshaped him, inside and out. His presence at the service was a milestone, The rehabilitation center's staff had granted permission based on his consistent progress and demonstrated commitment to change. Cole found a seat in the last pew, feeling both out of place and strangely at home. The service began with familiar carols. Cole watched as Mia joined the choir, her voice blending with others in ancient songs of hope and renewal. The candlelight caught the silver threads in her dark hair, and he remembered that first moment outside the liquor store, when her unexpected kindness had cracked his carefully maintained facade. Pastor Roberts delivered a message about transformation, how light could pierce the darkest night, how grace could find the most unexpected paths. Cole listened intently, recognizing his own journey in the words. He'd learned more about faith in the past year than in all his previous years combined, though he still struggled with feeling worthy of it. After the service, as the congregation filtered out into the snowy evening, Mia found Cole standing near the coat rack. Their greeting was simple, a quiet hello, a shared smile. No dramatic gestures or grand declarations needed. They had developed a friendship built on respect, understanding, and the shared experience of that transformative Christmas Eve. "I got a letter from Dad today," Mia said, pulling an envelope from her pocket. "He wanted me to share it with you." They moved to a quiet corner of the church foyer. Frank's handwriting was neat but showed signs of age. The letter spoke of gratitude, for his daughter's forgiveness, for Cole's choice that night, for the chance to make things right. He was safe in his new life, finding his own path to redemption. The letter ended with a simple blessing for them both. Cole folded the letter carefully, handed it back. "He's a good man," he said quietly. "Always was, underneath it all." Mia nodded, tucking the letter away. "We're loading up the delivery vans for the meal program," she said. "Could use an extra pair of hands if you're interested." "The center gave me permission to stay out until 10 o'clock, Cole replied. "I'd like to help." They descended to the basement, where volunteers were packing insulated bags with hot meals and Christmas treats. Cole fell easily into the work, his strength useful for carrying heavy boxes. He noticed how naturally Mia organized everything, how she knew exactly which elderly shut-in preferred sugar-free desserts, which homeless veteran needed extra blankets. The delivery routes were carefully planned. Cole and Mia took the north side of town, where many elderly residents lived alone. At each stop, Mia introduced Cole simply as "my friend," and he found himself welcomed without question. They climbed icy steps, knocked on doors, delivered not just meals but moments of connection to people often forgotten by the wider world. Between deliveries, they talked quietly about their lives. Cole shared news about his job at the construction company. He'd been promoted to crew leader, responsible for training new workers. Mia spoke of her hospice patients, the sacred privilege of helping people face their final days with dignity. The snow continued falling, transforming the town into a peaceful wonderland. As they drove between deliveries, Cole noticed Christmas lights reflecting off the fresh snow, creating halos of color in the darkness. It was so different from last year's bitter storm, yet somehow the quiet beauty felt right, a reflection of how much had changed. Their last delivery was to Mrs. Henderson, an elderly widow who lived in a small house near the park. She insisted they come in for a moment, offered them Christmas cookies she'd somehow managed to bake despite her arthritis. As they sat briefly in her warm kitchen, Cole watched Mia chat easily with the old woman, drawing out stories about Christmases long past. Back in the church parking lot, they unloaded empty containers from the van. The night was drawing to a close. Cole needed to return to the center, and Mia had an early shift at the hospice the next day. But they lingered for a moment in the peaceful night. "Thank you," Cole said simply, "for everything." Mia smiled, adjusted her jacket, his jacket, her jacket, their shared reminder of grace. "That's what Christmas is about," she replied. passing on what we've been given. They parted ways beneath gently falling snow, each carrying the quiet certainty that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as simple acts of kindness on cold winter nights. The church bells tolled softly, marking the hour, as they went their separate ways into the Christmas Eve night, changed, healing, and full of hope. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.